Greetings, all, and welcome to the Cognitive Edge. I am the host, Dr. Daniel A. Sable. Today, I want to explore the topic of how teachers really explore basically how teachers, librarians, technology leaders, and families can really help students become stronger thinkers and more confident learners. So today I want to really discuss a simple but important question, and that is, what is the best way to teach students how to become good at something? So whether a student wants to become a better reader, writer, researcher, musician, athlete, artist, programmer, or problem solver, the process is remarkably similar. Students do not become good at something simply because we explain it well. They become good at it because they practice, they receive feedback, they reflect, they make adjustments, and they continue working even when improvement feels slow. Um, that sounds kind of obvious, I guess, but yet schools sometimes teach students as though competence should appear immediately. We explain a concept, assign an activity, give a grade, and move on. Students who understand quickly may believe that they are naturally talented. Students who struggle may believe they are not good at the subject, but neither conclusion is especially helpful. Um, Becoming good at something is not really an event, it's more of a process I've seen over the years. The first thing students need to do is have a really clear picture of what success looks like. Telling a student to write better or read more carefully or improve your presentation is not enough. Those instructions are too vague, and students need to see strong examples. So, examine the parts that make those examples effective and understand what they are working towards. A student cannot improve effectively when a destination is hidden. Teachers and librarians can help by modeling the process. We can show students how a skilled reader pauses to ask questions, how a writer revises an unclear paragraph, how a researcher evaluates a source, or how a presenter recovers after losing track of an idea. Students often see only the polished final product of something, or they see us up in the front as sage on the stage, so to speak. They see the finished book, or the correct answer, or the impressive presentation, or the completed project. They do not see the rough drafts, or the failed attempts, or the deleted paragraphs, or the incorrect calculations, or the multiple hours of practice that came before doing what they're doing. When educators reveal that hidden process, struggle becomes less embarrassing. Students begin to understand that make mistakes are not proof that they cannot learn. Mistakes are information about what they need to work on next. And that's really important. The next part of becoming good at something is focused practice. Not all practice is equally useful. Repeating the task without thinking may build familiarity, but it does not always build skills. Students really need practice that is purposeful. They need to work on a specific weakness, strategy, or technique. For example, telling a student to read for 30 minutes may be helpful, but it's not always enough. A student who struggles with comprehension may need to practice identifying the main idea, making inferences, summarizing a section, or noticing when meaning has been lost. A student who wants to become a better writer may need to write 10 more essays. That student also may need focus, practice creating stronger instruction, organizing evidence, varying sentence structure, or revising for clarity. The goal is really not simply more work, the goal is better designed work. This is where educators play a critical role. We help students identify the next manageable steps. Um, Large goals can feel very overwhelming to students. A student may say, I want to become a good writer, but that goal is too broad to guide daily action. A more useful goal might be today, I'm going to improve the evidence in one paragraph. Um, that's pretty specific, it's achievable, it gives the student something concrete to practice and evaluate. Students also need the right level of challenge. If the work is too easy, they may become bored. If it is far beyond their current ability, they may become discouraged. The most important productive learning often happens when a task is difficult enough to ultimately require effort, but manageable enough that progress is possible. We want students to stretch, but not snap. Um, Feedback is another essential part of the improvement loop, so to speak, we'll call it. However, feedback must be timely and specific and useful. A grade alone does not allow a student um, or does not tell a student how to improve. A score of 72 may communicate that something went wrong, but it does not explain what the student should do differently next time. Effective feedback answers three questions: what did you do well? What needs improvement? And what should you try next? And instead of saying, this needs more detail, we may say, your main idea is clear, but your second paragraph needs an example that shows why your claim matters. Um, that kind of feedback gives the student a path forward or a way of starting to think, sort of a framework, so to speak. Feedback should also be followed by another opportunity to try. So if we provide detailed comments after the project is finished and never allow students to revise, the feedback becomes more like a post-mortem than a learning tool. Um, Really, improvement requires that this cycle, this you make an attempt, you get feedback, you do a revision, and you do give another attempt. So it's attempt, feedback, revision, and another attempt. Students should not experience every mistake as permanent. That needs to, or they need to, and they need opportunities to use what they've learned. Revision teaches students that their first effort does not have to be their final identity. Reflection also matters. Students need time to think about how they are learning, not just what they are learning. After completing a task, students can ask themselves, well, what worked? Where did I get stuck? What strategies helped me? And what would I do differently next time? These questions, they build metacognition or thinking about thinking. What is it the ability, which is the ability to think about one's own thinking? A student who understands how they learn is better prepared to improve independently. Um, this is one of probably the most important goals of education. We do not want students to depend on a teacher for every correction. We want them to become capable of evaluating their own work and recognizing weaknesses, selecting strategies, and making changes. In other words, we really want students to become their own coaches. Teachers and librarians can support this by using learning journals, exit reflections, conferencing, peer review, and self assessment. Even a brief reflection, I apologize, can help students notice patterns in their performance. Um, a student might realize I rush when I'm nervous, or I understand difficult text better when I take notes, or I do better when I break a large project into smaller parts. Those discoveries are valuable because they can transfer beyond one assignment. Um, Students, they also need to kind of develop patience with the process. In a world of instant answers, students can easily confuse um, speed with intelligence. Fast does not necessarily mean intelligent. Students may believe that if they do not understand something immediately, they are not capable of understanding it. Um, and we have to challenge this belief. Some of the most meaningful learning is slow. It requires confusion, repetition, adjustment, and persistence, which is probably the most important one. Struggle is not always a sign that a learner or that learning has failed. Sometimes struggle is the evidence that learning is happening. Um, at the same time, we should not romanticize frustration. Telling students to try harder is not enough. Um, when effort is not producing improvement, students may need a different strategy, more background knowledge, and additional support, or possibly a clearer explanation. Persistence does not mean repeating an ineffective method forever. Persistence means staying committed to the goal while being willing to change the approach. This distinction is important. Remember, students should learn that successful people are not simply stubborn, they're adaptive. They pay attention to results. They ask for help, they experiment, and then they make changes. Educators, we can model this flexibility, and we can say that strategy did not work as well as we hoped. Let's try another approach. This begins to teach students that changing directions is not failure, it's intelligent problem solving, really. Motivation also plays a major role in becoming a good um, student and really becoming great at something. Students are more likely to practice when they see meaning in the work. So, do they make a connection with it, or is it going to help them in some way? Um, so, this does not mean that every task must be entertaining, but learning cannot always compete with video games or social media and endless online distractions. However, students really should understand why a skill matters. A teacher can explain how strong writing helps people defend ideas. A librarian can demonstrate how research skills protect people from misinformation. A mathematics teacher can show how quantitative reasoning affects financial decisions. A technology teacher can connect coding to creativity, problem solving, and to future opportunities. When students really see a purpose, practice becomes more than compliance. Choice can also increase ownership. So, whenever possible, if you can, allow students to choose a topic, format, question, a book, a tool, or area of focus. Choice does not eliminate academic expectations. It gives students a personal connection to those expectations. Students are more likely to become good at something when they begin to see themselves as the kind of person who does it. A student moves from saying, I have to write, to saying, I'm becoming a writer. So we have to change that, the wording there, and the way they're thinking, build a strong mindset. A student moves from saying, I have to research, to saying, I know how to investigate a question. Identity grows through repeated action, and each small success becomes evident that improvement is possible. Teachable moments are everywhere, and it's just a matter of finding them or seeing students that are, um, failing at doing that. So, this is why progress should really be made visible. Students need to compare their work with earlier work, or they need to see how far they've come, not only how far they still have to go. Portfolios, reading records, drafts, project logs, and skill trackers can help students really recognize growth. Sometimes a student feels stuck because improvement happens really gradually. When we show them an earlier draft of performance, the progress becomes undeniable. And this moment is an awakening and can be very powerful to students. Peer learning can also help students develop skills. Students benefit from seeing how classmates approach the same problem. They learn that there's many more ways than one effective strategy. They practice giving feedback, explaining ideas, and defending choices. However, remember that comparison must be handled carefully. The purpose is not to rank students or make them feel inadequate. The purpose is to explain their understanding of what is possible. Um, Students really should compare strategies and progress, not personal worth. Um, Technology can support this process, but should it not replace it? Um, Artificial intelligence, adaptive learning, video tutorials, simulations, digital creation tools can provide practice, examples, and feedback. They can help students explore difficult concepts and work at an appropriate pace. But technology, it can also make it easy to avoid the productive struggle that builds the skill. If a tool does not, or if a tool does all the thinking, the student may complete the task without the development and the ability to complete the task. So the question really should not be, did the technology help the student finish faster? The question really needs to be, did the technology help the student become more capable? This is the standard we must use to teach students how to become good at something. We must create a culture in which improvement matters more than appearance. Students should not feel that they must pretend to understand. They should feel safe saying, I do not understand this yet. And as I keep saying, that one word yet actually matters. It leaves the door open. It tells students that current performance is not a permanent verdict or a place where you're stuck. It reminds them that the ability can grow through instruction, practice, feedback, and reflection. Ultimately, the best way to teach students how to become good at something is to teach them the process of improvement. Um, Show them really what quality looks like, and then break complex skills into manageable parts. Give them focused practice, provide meaningful feedback, allow revision, encourage reflection, which is very important. Obviously, we want to really make the progress visible, and we want to help students find their purpose. We want to teach them how to persist, but also to adapt. Most important, helping students understand that become good at something that is not about failing. It's about learning what to do after failure. Um, we want students to learn how to improve um, the information they've gained more than one academic skill, that students have really gained a method for approaching future challenges. So we don't want one skill, we want a bunch. They can apply that method to college, to work, relationships, creativity, leadership, and life. Education should not merely produce students who can perform well when the instructions are clear. It should develop people who know how to grow when the path is uncertain. That is the real cognitive edge. Thank you for joining me. This is Dr. Daniel A. Sable, and this is another episode of The Cognitive Edge. Have a lovely weekend. Talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye bye.